Welcome to the Spot On Insurance Podcast, brought to you by Insurance Licensing Services of America, ILSA. This is Arlene Tavares.
And this is Ted Tavares, coming to you from the island of Puerto Rico. In this episode, we'll be delving into the insurance company side.
But before we get started, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And now, here's our host, Doug Foresta.
Welcome to Spot On Insurance. This is your host, Doug Foresta. Today with me is Roger Sitkins, CEO of the Sitkins Group, and we're going to be talking about the 7 principles for building a solid agency foundation. I'll say a little bit about Roger, bring him right on. Roger Sitkins, as I said, is the CEO of the Sitkins Group, Inc., and he is the developer of the Better Way Agency program. He's trained and mentored thousands of insurance professionals, producers, CEOs, sales managers, and CSRs with diverse levels of experience. Have all benefited tremendously under his training and leadership. He's recognized as the nation's top insurance agency results coach and has often been the keynote speaker for national, state, and local agents association events. He's the author of Winning Strategies, a monthly column that has been published in more than 150 issues of Rough Notes magazine. And he is the most widely read of all the publication's columnists. Roger Sitkins, welcome.
Well, thank you, Doug. It's really great to be with you today and to share some ideas with your listeners.
Thank you. So, let's start with, obviously, like I said, we're going to be talking about these 7 principles for building a solid agency foundation. And I thought maybe we could actually just go through them. But is there anything you'd like to say before that, just about some of the ways in which, it's probably a big question, but some of the ways in which people kind of get it wrong when they start to build an agency?
Well, it's like building any building. You have to have a solid foundation. And what we see all too often is some of the basics get ignored because people are out there and they're building the organization and they're just trying to sell insurance. They have to get clients. But many, many times as they get to a certain size, they realize that foundation's a little shaky. And not having these things in place is what gets an agency or an individual producers booked to where they plateau, and pretty soon we probably all know the old saying, it's coming in the front door and going out the back. So the rapid growth they had early on starts becoming very flat growth at best.
So let's talk about these 7 principles. And I thought maybe, like I said, we'll actually just go through them. I think it'd be great for listeners. So could you talk about, say, the first principle of building a solid agency foundation?
The first principle is the people itself. We have to have the right people in the right seats. We probably all read the book, Good is the Enemy of Great. To have the right people in the right seats, all facing in the same direction. So do we have the right talent? And many, many times I see agencies get hung up on they have to hire insurance knowledge. No one listening on this broadcast had insurance knowledge when they were born. We all got it. None of us were born with it.
That's true.
And so getting talent that we teach, and of course using your services and getting them properly licensed and doing all the right things, but we have to have the right people in the right jobs, looking at those things that they're uniquely qualified to do and making sure they're all facing in the same direction and that there's a common vision and people know where the organization's going and they know why they're in the seat they're in and what the expectations are. So it all starts with people. Tied to that, we have to have the people that we're training them. Again, we're going to hire talent. We have to train them in the insurance knowledge. We have to train them in all the aspects of their job. I did a little study on this last year, and I saw, based upon the best practices study, which is certainly leads the industry as far as what you should be doing within your organization financially, that in the average agency, and even the best practices ones, they only spend 0.4% of their revenues on training, on development of their people. And if you look at the best professional services firms, and that's what an agency is, they'll spend at least 2% of their revenue. So there's a tremendous training gap there where they're just too busy to train. And then within all of that, the overriding theme is they have to have a culture of accountability. And I'll tell you, Doug, when I work with the great agencies, and I'm really blessed to work with some phenomenal firms that get even better results when we can work together. And that's, I guess, a self-serving comment, but it's true. But when I look at the ones that implement at the highest level, there's a tremendous difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it. The difference is, do they have a culture of accountability? Do they have a system where and culture, accountability is pretty simple. Did you do what you said you were going to do? And the agency owners that are listening in, how frustrated do you get when you say, well, okay, here's what we're going to do, and everybody agrees. And then because the people are not held accountable, most of the staff sits there at this new meeting. We've just come back from a Sitkins seminar, and we're all excited. And what does the staff say? They look at each other after the meeting and go, don't worry, this too shall pass.
Right.
Excited about something else. So it's people, it's the right people, it's the ongoing training them. And then, of course, the culture of accountability, where at a minimum on a monthly basis, they're held accountable. Did you do what you said you were going to do? And the best agencies have some form of reverse performance management where the employee is reporting up on a weekly basis to their direct manager saying, here's what I said I was going to do. Here's what I got done last week. Here's what I'm going to do this week. It makes all the difference in the world.
So let's talk about the next principle of building a solid agency foundation after we've got those right people in place, that culture of accountability.
It's the product itself. And these are all P's that just kind of worked out that way. The product. And it's not the insurance products that they sell. I mean, let's face it. Every agency has products they can sell. They've got the carriers they represent. They've got the various classes of business. They've got products they can sell, types of policies. But the product itself that the agency puts out, because it's the insurance carrier that provides the insurance product, the product the agency puts out, to me, is the unique selling proposition of the organization. And the unique selling proposition defined is the unique and appealing ideas and things that separate you and your agency from all other Me Too competitors. It's differentiation. I mean, let's face it, agents and agencies are fighting a commodity game right now. And it's going to be a really tough game to beat when your big direct writing competitors are spending over $1 billion a year each teaching the consumer it's all about price. Call this number, click here, etc. So to me, it's what do you do that differentiates you to the point, and here's a filter for people. What's the product you provide, your unique process, that basically gets the consumer, whether it's personal lines or commercial lines or benefits or life insurance, financial services, gets the consumer to say, wow, no one's ever brought that up to me before. Wow, no one's ever shared that with me before. So if you're not hearing wow from your prospects, then you've fallen into that bucket known as an insurance agent. And here's what they hear. You guys are all the same. If you want to give us a quote, go ahead.
Right. And now you're a commodity and it's just purely price, right? And it's a race to the bottom.
Purely price only selling. So what it really all boils down to is, what's the client experience? How do they feel after they've dealt with you? Do they feel like, wow, that was really unique, and now I have a better understanding of how, as let's say from a commercial perspective, the commercial buyer, and it doesn't matter what size they are, can now say, you know what? I can have an impact and do things that will help control my total cost to risk. In fact, no one's ever even brought it up to me before. And there are things I can do as a business owner that will make my account look more attractive to the insurance marketplace. And so now all of a sudden they're feeling different, and that's a positive client experience. So the product revolves around all of that.
So we've got 2 P's so far, right? People, product. So what's the third P?
The third one is professionalism, and it's really part of your brand. It's the look and feel to everything that you do as an organization. So the professionalism. So it's little things like, what does your stationery look like? Going all the way back to the old days. What does your website look like? I'm appalled at some of the websites that I look at that are, it's a website in a box that they bought, and they click here and they get a free website where they pay a small fee, but it just looks like everybody else's. And there are things on their website that look unprofessional, totally, and it just gives the image of, I hate this when I say, click here for a free quote. And I've had people on my staff on their own personal insurance that have clicked for a free quote or sent an email and never, ever hear back, okay?
That's amazing.
So again, the professionalism is just the look and feel of everything you do. Let's face it, when you're dealing with a professional organization, it just looks and feels better. So how hard are the agencies working on their brand? Another big part of the professionalism ties back to the product. There's a saying we use in our producer training program, the ProFit program, Producer Fit, that says prescription, it's a term from the medical industry, said prescription without proper diagnosis is malpractice. Okay. Well, that's an E&O on our side. And I see agents that'll walk in, say, hi, nice to meet you. Tell me what you guys do here, because they haven't done any research, by the way. Let's take a look at your policies. We'll give you a quote. And it's what we've coined the old way of selling, the look, copy, quote, and pray. We're going to look at your policy, give you a quote, pray it's a low price, and by the way, then start begging you to call me back. And so when I look at pure professionalism on the commercial side and even the VIP personal line side, I can't imagine an agent that would go in, work on someone's account, and on the commercial side, not do an industry-specific risk survey, or on the personal side, do a risk survey that's tied to the needs of the individual. And it's so easy to get now. Most of the automation systems have got some sort of reference program in there they can use. Certainly the foundation for all of those is Rough Notes, the Rough Notes Advantage program. And if you want to differentiate, getting back to the product, just walk in and do a risk survey. Ask the prospect, when's the last time your current agent completed a risk survey? And by the way, how many recommendations were on there? And how did you do as far as implementing those? Of course, the prospect's going to say, what? I've never even heard of that.
Right.
Heard of it. So it's the research, which I briefly mentioned, of being prepared. I firmly believe that every producer, in fact, if I were the sales manager for every agency, which would be pretty scary because they would be held accountable, but every producer, before they're going out on a targeted commercial account, should have done research, and it's really easy today, done research to the point where they would know what are the first 3 risk-based questions you're going to ask this prospect. And one of the questions can't be, tell me what you guys do here, because you'd be thrown out in today. Right. But if you're going to help people become more attractive, have an impact on total cost of risk, et cetera, then you better know things about them, and you better know the first 3 questions you're going to ask that help you to understand the prospect. I've been doing a lot of work over the last few years with the Hartford School of Insurance. And one of the things I learned there is, based on some of the research they did in the small to mid-sized commercial account market, was that the number one complaint the consumer, the business owner, had about the agents they've dealt with is that they did not understand the business. They didn't understand the prospect's business. So this is all part of this professionalism. How can you possibly work on an account, say you're doing a great job, without proper diagnosis? It's crazy.
Thank you. Yeah, very powerful. So that's professionalism. What is the next one?
Well, it ties back a little bit to all of these tie together, but because it's all part of the foundation. But it's the processes. It's amazing to me how agencies don't follow processes. They have to have documented processes that people are held accountable to, so they work. So they're all doing things the same way. My early days of consulting with agencies, and I would go and work one-on-one with an agency. And I would go in and I would meet the personal line staff, then the commercial line staff, then claims if it was separate, accounting, the human resource, the producers, and of course the ownership group. And I would always start off, let's say in personal lines or commercial, with the service people. I'd say, well, tell me a little bit more about how you work. How do you handle new business? And the first person would say, well, I do it this way. And invariably, the second person would say, I don't do it that way. I do it a little bit different. And the third person would say, I don't do it either one of those ways. I do it my way. So there was never a documented process that people could follow. Now, in today's world of technology, where the processes drive, the technology drives the processes, we should have very specific processes that are followed. You mentioned our Better Way Agency program. My content partner on that program is Angela Adams Consulting, which is one of the best kept secrets in our industry, by the way. She's got a great firm, best I've ever seen as far as working with the internal processes and maximizing technology. And when we first got together and started talking about how we could build a overall system to help an agency, an overall program, I asked her, I said, what percent of the automation system, the capabilities, does an average agency use today? And she said, a little bit less than 50%.
Man.
That's like having an employee you're paying full-time, but shows up part-time. So having the processes that revolve around how do we handle new business? What's our renewal process? What's our claims process? What's our accounting process? You can name every single process you want. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a truly documented agency's way of doing business that you train people to and you hold them accountable to, then you've got multiple processes on everything you do, and it gets very, very expensive. When we look at agencies' results, and we look at one of the key performance indicators for any agency, revenue per employee and spread per employee, and people say, well, gee, my revenue per employee is pretty low. And then you talk to the staff, and they're saying, well, we need more people. Well, it's because everybody's doing something different. Throwing more people at the problem just adds more expense. You've got to get down to know that the things we already have, the resources, and in this case, the technology, is it being maximized? Don't just throw more people at it that are, you already have a bunch of ineffective people. Well, throw more at them, and that's what they'll become too. So the processes drive so many things. And again, I have to stress, it's the agency's way of doing business.
Spot on Insurance is sponsored by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America, America's premier insurance licensing experts. To learn more about ILSA and the services they provide, visit ilsainc.com. Roger, I have a question for you about this. So, obviously, if I'm starting a new agency, that's a great opportunity for me to build these processes in from day one. But what if I'm listening to this and I already have an agency and I realize that my processes are not what they should be or they're not standardized? Is it too late, or can I take a step back and revamp things? And what would that look like?
Well, it's one of the problems that a lot of agencies have is when they realize they have these issues, then they look at their financial results and they go, I'm doing okay anyway, so why would I want to rock the boat?
Why bother, right?
And I got to deal with the people, and they're going to complain, and they're going to say, don't worry, this too shall pass, and I won't hold them accountable, so it's not worth it. But if you're serious about it, then you've got to take a look at it, and you've got to get the people to understand, look, we have to have a common way of doing things. It's going to make it a lot easier. Plus, take it right to the internal employee level. If the agency does not improve its profitability, it cannot give raises, or the only way it'll give a raise is if the ownership group takes less money. I remember in some of our early, what we used to call the CSRs, now, of course, account managers or personal risk manager, commercial risk manager, but we would have live camps and we would bring them in, and my staff would do the training. But I would always do the opening, welcome them, thank them for coming, and just set the tone for the 2-day event. And I would ask them right up front, should your agency make a profit? Well, sure. Well, why? Well, I guess the owner wants it. I said, the reason the agency needs to make a profit, and you need to be part of making it an improved profit, is so they can pay you more. And I was shocked when people go, really? I never thought of that. So everybody listens, the old saying, everybody listens to the same radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me? So we've got to get the people to understand what's in it for them. And then another big thing I've learned from Angela Adams, she said what she found overall in the internal staff, if you're just stressing to them, we've got to do it this way, we've got to do it that way, they don't buy in as much. But because most of the internal staff cares about the client, the customer, if you say to them, this is how it benefits the customer, they seem to buy in much more. So it's having those communications with the staff, getting a team buy-in to, yes, we have to have common processes, we have to maximize technology, et cetera. Then what happens is that once you get the team buy-in and you hold them accountable, again, that big accountability word, then they seem to buy in. And again, at the end of the day, everybody wins. It's better for the employee, it's better for the client, it's better for the agency overall.
So that then brings us to
pipeline. Boy, I was doing a private producer camp recently, and it's a large agency, and we had about 18 or 19 new producers. And this one of the sales managers, multiple sales managers in this agency because of multiple locations. But one of the sales managers pointed out something that just kind of blew me away. It's one of those BFOs, blinding flashes of the obvious. He said, you know what, Roger? Even with a poor closing ratio, we'll do okay if our pipelines are overflowing. Now, we don't believe in low closing ratios. We believe in very high. We believe in super qualifying. We believe the best day to lose the sale is the first day. We believe in no unpaid consulting. But even if you have a bad closing ratio, by the way, most agencies don't even measure it. They guess, okay? Well, let's assume that they knew what their closing ratio is. Well, then at the end of the day is, well, maybe we can't improve closing ratio, but we better improve at-bats. There's a very specific process or cycle that we see producers go through when they go through our Producer Fit program, that the first thing they improve is their conversion ratio, which is the percent of first appointments that move forward to the second. Then if they get them into the process itself, because the first appointment on a mid to large size account should be much more of an executive briefing. Here's what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, okay? And then get a prospect to agree that it's unique, different, they're willing to go through it. Then we move forward, and when we actually wind up presenting solutions, I don't believe in giving quotes or proposals. I want to present solutions to mutually agreed upon problems. Then we have a high closing ratio. So for conversion ratio is good, closing ratio is good, and then we consistently raise the bar on our minimum account size and targeted account size. The only thing you have left to worry about then is your quantity and quality of at-bats. So our ultimate goal on pipeline development and pipeline management is that you always have more opportunities than time. Let's face it, every producer listening in, or owners that used to be producers are now stuck running their business. Every one of us has worked on an account we knew we wouldn't get. And why is that? Well, because we had nothing better to do. And you never know, you might get lucky. What the heck? Maybe I'll get a really low price. The underwriter will have fallen asleep. I'll get a really low price and I'll get the account, okay? But the end of the day is like, do I have more opportunities than time? Now, the key, Doug, is opportunities with what? The pipeline has to be full of future ideal clients. Agents and agencies have to know what a great future client looks like for them, because every client is not a great client. You know, in the old days, I remember my own agency in Michigan. You know, if they fogged up a mirror, I'd chase them. Rather than saying, define what's the customer you're looking for? What's the class of business? What's the size? What's the location? What's the ownership? What's their attitude towards risk management? You know, how do they believe in having a trusted advisor relationship or a vendor relationship? And then getting out there and working very hard through social media, through digital marketing, through networking, through, boy, this is an old one, asking for referrals, asking for introductions. But getting to the point where at a minimum as a producer, I have my top 20 prospects, and they're targeted prospects, not suspects that are just filling up a bag. And those 20 are in ongoing digital campaigns, drip marketing, whatever you want to call it. And then I've also got another 20 that I'm developing. And so I get to the point where I have more opportunities than time. Once you do that as a producer or as an agency overall, you start super qualifying right up front. I could see this prospect or I could see this one. Which one am I going to have a best opportunity with? And that's how you start improving that closing ratio overall. So it still comes down to pipelines. For younger producers, it's an activity they should be doing all the time. I'm amazed when I'll ask a group of producers, all right, how many of you that have been in the business less than 5 years that don't already have at least $500,000 of commission income, how many of you have an appointment with yourself 2 or 3 times a week just to do pipeline development? Now, for some producers, in fact, one of the ones I was working with at the Hartford School of Insurance a couple of months ago, he loves to do drive-bys and drop-bys. Well, that's pretty old-fashioned, okay? But the reality is it really works for him. And he said 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, he built it into what we coined the producer's perfect schedule to maximize your time. Tuesdays and Thursdays, he goes out first thing in the morning, and he does 20 drop-offs per day. Now, that's unheard of in today's marketplace.
Wow.
Others sit there and they say, no, I'm going to work hard on my LinkedIn. I'm going to do additional digital marketing. Maybe I'll do some smiling and dialing, but it's always working on the pipeline. So every agency out there, everyone that's listening, if you don't have every one of your producers with at least a top 20, or the agency overall, from the senior leadership all the way down, your combined list is not at least the top 100 you're going to write, who are you chasing? I'll never forget, Doug, it just flashed in my mind several years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, maybe even more. I was doing a presentation to a state association, which I've done just about every state now. And I said, all right, who are your prospects? And this one guy in the front row was exceedingly honest. He said, I don't know. They haven't called me yet. Sitting there aggressively waiting for the phone to ring is strategy. So, but pipelines are crucial, obviously. You've got to have somebody, it's great if you've got everything else, but if you don't have somebody you can sell something to, you don't grow much.
This is great. So I know we have 2 more P's. So let's go ahead and get to them. So what's the next principle?
Well, you can do all of these things, but if you're not making a profit, okay, you're in real trouble. It's amazing to me the amount of dollars and ultimately agency value that's lost each and every year. Probably the article that I've written in Roughness where I received the greatest feedback was called Stop Losing Millions. And so that would, of course, get your attention if you're an agency owner.
Yes.
But the point that I wrote the article, I said, for every $125,000 of unrealized profit, because you're either wasting money, you're very low revenue per employee, again, whatever you're looking at, or you're not gaining money because you're not doing the right things, all these foundational things, every $125,000 of unrealized profit is $1 million of value. Because at that point, this was a little over a year ago when I did the article, at that point, the EBITDA multiplier on the agency valuations was around 8. So 8 times 125 is $1 million. Well, the one at the point where we're doing this interview that I just saw where Reagan does their report, it said that the average multiple now is 11.2. Well, wow. That's at $125,000 of unrealized profit is about $1.4 million of unrealized value. And for agency owners, the vast majority I've ever known, and it's thousands, the agency itself is their largest or certainly one of their largest personal assets. And yet they don't demand of themselves profit. So when we look at profit, we say it has to be operating profit. No investment income, no contingency income included. So if you don't have at least a 25% profit, operating profit, where are you wasting money? You're either under-incomed or over-expensed, or it's a combination of it. Many times when we're working with agencies, one of the things we stress to them, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And people will accuse some people of, or they'll say, well, how can you make a 30% profit? How could you make a 40% profit? I'll never forget the first time at one of our CEO forums we were holding, that question came up and said, well, what could it be? And I said, well, you could make a 40% profit. And everybody went, wow, how do you do that? And I said, okay, here's a secret. Everybody write it down. The way you make a 40% profit is you only spend 60%.
Right. That's good.
Somewhat tongue in cheek. But the reality is when you do your planning and you create a financial model, and I sure hope you have it, the bottom line should become the top line. So it's what's my end in mind? Why am I doing this? Well, I want to make a 40% profit. Great. We can only spend 60%. How are we going to spend it? And so in my case, where we're seeing a minimum of a 25% operating profit, that means we've got 75% left. And what do we say? Well, our model overall is 25, 50, 25. You have a 25% operating profit. You spend 50% on service and administrative expenses and 25% on sales and sales-related expenses. Thus, you make 25%. And then if you're like an average, pretty good run agency, you're at that 8 to 10% of your revenue would be contingency / investment income. So now your profit, instead of being 25%, is really 35%. Because you've managed it properly. But if you don't have a model, you just go out there and you have this hysterical activity on the way to the grave, and at the end of the year you go, wow, I wonder how we did. Or they look at their P&L in March and April when the contingencies have come in and they go, God, I'm a great manager, rather than looking at where are we really going, what have we really done on a 12-month trailing basis. So all of this still comes down to, are you making a profit, an acceptable profit, and are you constantly increasing the value of your resource, of your asset? So profit's huge on all of this, obviously. All the other stuff doesn't matter if we're losing money doing it.
So that brings us to the last principle and the last P, which is
perpetuation. Everybody eventually leaves their business, whether they think they're going to or not. None of us keep us alive. And at some point, everybody winds up, I hope, with a great retirement. Okay, and most people don't think about it, even though they might be talking to their clients about it. It's the shoemaker's kids. So everybody's going to eventually leave their business. And when we look at perpetuation, there really are two types of perpetuation. There's the financial perpetuation and there's the leadership perpetuation. And let's face it, Doug, the venture capital money is so big right now, so high, because and people say, why are the venture capitalists coming and throwing so much money at it? Because it's a great business, okay? So because most agencies haven't managed properly, they haven't put their dollars away, they haven't really pushed hard on the profitability, it's a pretty good alternative for them. But if you're managing it to the proper profit and you really are going to do internal perpetuation, then the next part of it becomes leadership perpetuation. Are you building your team? And when we look at the average agency today and we say, okay, who's the next leader? There's no one there. Because they're not working on it. Even and myself and other consulting firms that I respect in the industry, and we've talked about this. So let's say we're running a next leader or emerging leaders program, and you look around, there's not too many people to attend. And yet certain agencies, one that I did private planning with for over 20 years, it's one of the best agencies I've ever dealt with. When the son came in, he was really a sharp guy, had an Ivy League degree, worked on Wall Street for a while. In fact, I wound up going to Wharton School also. When he came in and he got going in the business and he proved that he could get out and sell insurance, but he had this great knowledge base, then we sat down and put together a very specific plan of knowledge transfer. What are the things that dad does on a regular basis that the son eventually needs to take over? So we built the leadership perpetuation. In fact, we put it on a spreadsheet, put a 2-year plan together saying, okay, every month, here's something that the dad, in this case, is going to teach the son, and then the son will take over. And we actually got the perpetuation done in 18 months, but we were building the team there. So agencies have got to decide, okay, what's our perpetuation? Is it going to be internal? If it is, we better have great financial management, and we better start developing our people. If it's going to be external, then you better grow it very quickly, make the right things happen, and then increase the value, stop losing millions. So those overall, and there are probably 100 more we could talk about, but if we're going to build the core foundation, then we've got to say these 7 Ps have got to be in place. If not, it's pretty shaky.
My guest today has been Roger Sitkins. We've been discussing the 7 principles of a solid agency foundation. This has been great information. And I know, right, like you said, this could be a 4-hour podcast, but of course, we don't have time for that today. So if people want to learn more about you and they want some support in this, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is to go to our website, www.sitkins, very easy to spell, S-I-T as in Tom, KINS.com. They can learn more there, or they can call us at 1-877-SITKINS, and we'll be happy to share some information with them. There's some free tools that are available on our website that people can take advantage of. They can also learn more about our various profit programs, as there's some videos there. So please feel free to reach out and let us know if we can help you.
Roger Sitkins, thank you so much for joining me today.
Doug, it's really my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Direct your podcast questions to iask@soyteam.com. Share this podcast with your friends and remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
As always, thanks for joining us. And please remember, we'll be answering this week's podcast questions at Spot On Insurance Facebook Live, Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern.